What are some paradoxes that make your brain hurt? Silvermorn said. Password incorrect. Change password. You can't use the same password. Actual giant penguin said. One real-world example was SAT scores in the United States in the late 20th century. People started panicking in the early 80s because average SAT scores showed a downward trend, leading to the idea that public schools in the US were failing. Turns out, if you broke down students into subgroups like race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, academic performance, etc., the average scores of each subgroup were actually improving. Average scores as a whole were getting lower because, since college was getting more accessible, more students from traditionally lower-scoring subgroups were taking the SAT, for example students from poor households, students with mediocre grades, etc. The supposed crisis did not exist. Dan said. It's not that hard to understand, but it's really a strange thing. For those who don't know, you have a disease? Two solutions, surgery or pills. You look a study, pill work 80% of the time, surgery 20%. You go for the pill but your doctor tell you the surgery will be better. He takes the study and show you. Whenever the disease is mild, patient is recommended pill. Sickness mild, it works 80% of the time. When a mild disease patient takes surgery, it works 90% of the time but it barely happens. Whenever the disease is serious, patient is recommended surgery. But since it's serious, it works only 20% of the time. Pills have a 0% success. But since there is way more mild patients, and they always take the pill, pills get a better score than surgery, since it's only used for serious and often hopeless case, despite being more effective for mild and serious. Dan said. It's the breakdown of a second element. Why does A have a better score than B? It is better? Or is there a third factor? Why does the Dungeons tank have a higher DPS than the DPS? Because he engages first and forbid DPS to hit for a few seconds to secure aggro. Of course he hits more, he has more time. Why do Wednesday, Saturday and Sunday cashiers check more clients? Because it's busier those days. And when you overlook some crucial data, you can end up with a paradox. My wife don't know it's me said. As someone who has been on the hiring end of a lot of these decisions, I like to give this little tidbit when I see people bring this up. When a prospective employer is describing the requirements to fill an open position, don't think of that list as an absolute list of non-negotiable requirements. Think of it as a list of preferences for their ideal candidate. Ideally, everyone wants a new employee with experience. In reality, and especially nowadays with the employment market, sometimes the best applicant doesn't have much, or even any, experience, and that's okay from an employer's perspective. As long as they have an applicant that they like and think can do the job, and has the necessary licensure if needed, that's enough. So, if you see a job you want, but don't meet all the requirements, apply anyway. If you are asked about the lack of experience in a specific area in an interview, explain what you do know about it, from reading online, explain how you were eager to learn more, and describe any tangentially related experience you might have. You will be pleasantly surprised by the opportunities this approach opens up in your job hunt. Zunther said. Sometimes. I'm not quite that cynical though. I think more often than not it's an unintended consequence of somebody just wanting to streamline the HR process by trying to automatically triage the applicants that are applying for literally anything and don't meet the base requirements at all. Fewer resumes for them to manually go through that are ostensibly more grain and less chaff is the net positive, and that's all they care about. S. Romer said. I've been declined numerous of times because I didn't finish my university degree, because they needed someone with a larger skill set. And given some of those I went to university with, those that finished, was morons. I just find it hilarious. There are actual companies that have gotten the reputation that you shouldn't waste time applying with them, unless you have like a straight A+++ and a couple of a master's degree or some BS. And at the same while, all these huge tech companies are on LinkedIn, complaining about how there's a lack of qualified people around. Or how a lot of people are asking for too much money in job interviews. Zapatota said. Yeah, so the hiring manager says ideally we'd like someone with a bachelor's or a couple years experience, who knows A, B, And CD would be really great too if you can find someone, but it's kind of obscure. And HR rights requirements, bachelor's degree, 5 years experience. Experience with A, B, C, and D. Quotation mark. Then the HR system rejects everyone because they don't have D, even though the hiring manager never really expected to get it anyway. It's a twisted game of telephone tag. Ultimately, 9 times out of 10, the hiring manager really just needs someone who knows anything about anything and isn't going to be a PITA and disrupt the whole team. Ajibmwat said. Hence the creation of a parallel universe theory. The OG universe timeline in which your grandfather is still alive exists, but now so does a second one, beginning from the moment where you go back in time. In one of those timelines universes, the main of which is the one where your grandpappy is alive, with the other being a branch indirectly created by you, in which you do not exist, since your grandpappy died before having a kid. Quinn Drummer said. The answer is, why do you need to know? If it's for forensic reasons, then the ship made out of the replaced parts isn't the ship you need. You need the original parts to conduct whatever experiment or research you need to forensically assess. Maybe to look for DNA in a murder case something. If it's for legal reasons, then it will be whatever the ship's log says. Was the ship at this location on this date? Doesn't matter about the parts, just what the log registers as whatever identifies as its ship and where it says it was, etc. It's not really a paradox per se and not one to get in a twist about. It's a thought experiment there to draw out instinctive reactions to questions that you can then apply to more complicated real-life scenarios. Is a person the same person at age 10 as ages 50? Forensically, probably not. All of the cells will have been replaced. They've grown. They will have new features, maybe even missing a limb, etc. Legally, they are the same person. They have a record that follows them and that identifies them for who they are. Now the really interesting questions come when you start asking forensically if you at 10 are the same at 50. If so much about you has changed, can you be considered the same person? Is it morally permissible to charge you with a crime you committed at one stage in your life if you as a person has changed so dramatically, you wouldn't even recognize the person who committed the crime all those years ago? What if you don't even remember committing the crime? That's why that question, and thought experiments like it, exist. To be the launching off point for more interesting and important discussions. Nene Thunderhorse said. This is pretty much my thought. And it keeps me from staying awake all night thinking about these things. The only reason we have trouble accepting these things is because our reality shows that things begin and end. But, what if that isn't always the case? What if there's a reality where none of the rules of our reality exist as we see them? Suddenly, you can imagine answers for the unanswerable questions of existence, and you can just got the fuck to bed and get on with your life. Orange Pretzel said. The fucking double-slit experiment, it might be called something different now. The experience shows electrons, I think, act differently when observed or not, but the part that got me was even if the particles were recorded they knew and acted like they were being observed by humans. It breaks my brain to think about it, it makes me angry and paranoid at the same time, but I love it, it's so strange. I blame my daddy showed me a video explaining the experiment and it stuck with me most of my life. Bleeding Teal said. So first of all, there is a difference between checking your credit score and getting your credit report. You can check your credit score pretty much any time you want without impacting your score through a credit monitoring service such as Credit Karma. Obtaining your credit history is seen as essentially the same thing as applying for credit by the credit reporting agencies. In part because one typically does that when considering obtaining new credit. This is because it is counted as an inquiry, and each inquiry is tracked and exceeding a certain number, which I think is 3, over a certain period of time looks unfavorably because it looks poor to lenders because of risk perceived. Your credit score doesn't necessarily go down when you pay off a credit card. Your score will go down, however, when you close an open line of credit such as a credit card. The score isn't at all arbitrary. It's a blend of multiple factors with varied weighting on those factors, such as debt-to-income ratio, which is factored by adding all your monthly payments and dividing it by your monthly income before taxes. The payments considered are rent and mortgage, car loan, student loans, ATWR and personal credit cards, and lines of credit. So if all those add up to $2,500 and you make $5,000 a month, Your debt-to-income ratio would be 50%, which is bad and will cause your credit score to go down, as well as prevents you from obtaining any new lines of credit because you are overextended. Bleeding Teal said. Additionally, having a high utilization of your open lines of unsecured credit card balances, causes your score to go down. Having a balance of $2,000 on a card with a total line of credit of $5,000 is a 40% utilization, which is not good. It's also worth mentioning that this same factor applies to all your unsecured credit card balances. So if you have 3 cards with a combined total line of credit of $10,000, and combined you have a utilized amount of $4,000, it's not good for your credit score. Also worth mentioning that age of credit matters as well. This is calculated by adding the number of months on your open accounts together, then dividing that number by the number of accounts to get the average. This is why adding a new line of credit lowers your score, because it decreases the average age because of one additional account contributing 0 months of age to the math. The paradox to me when it comes to credit is how it is that exactly 0 of this shit is taught at any point in any formal education level, given how critical your credit score and history is in nearly all aspects of life, including some career aspects. I had to learn all this shit on my own in my 30s, and I'm glad I did. TLDR, pay your bills on time every time. Pay your credit cards off every month, and don't apply for new lines of credit more than once or twice a year at most. Do all that and you'll have a great credit score. Medium Technology 52 said. It is not a paradox, and it is very simple. Select one door. The odds of this being the correct door is 1/3. One of the other 2 doors is removed. The important part here is that the door removed is never the door you selected, nor is it the correct door. You are then offered to switch. You should. This is because if you selected an incorrect door, 2/3 chance, the removed door is the other incorrect door, leaving only a switch to the correct door. It's only if you selected the correct door at first, 1/3 chance, that switching doesn't work. The door remover can see the solution and is narrowing your options. This is the key. Tyrodofta 6789 said the sphere within which we might detect another civilization has a radius of only a few light years, and includes just a handful of stars which are all unlikely to harbor life. As if that weren't enough, out of the 4 billion years of life on Earth we've only had radio for about a century. That is a very tiny window for searching for other civilizations. The Milky Way is one of trillions of galaxies. It is about 100,000 li in diameter, and up to 2,000 li thick. It contains between 100 billion and 400 billion stars. There could be 1,000,000 advanced civilizations at any given moment just in our galaxy, and none would be close enough to another to detect each other. A more advanced civilization could broadcast across the galaxy for 1,000,000 years and never overlap in time with a civilization capable of detecting and decoding that signal. The answer to Fermi's paradox is simple: the scale of time and space is too great. Even a universe bursting with advanced technological civilizations would see few interactions. Nearly every civilization will spend its entire existence alone. Anamandaris said. The Voyager probe would take about 75,000 years to reach the nearest star 4 light-years away. Our newest solar probe goes 0.067% of the speed of light, and that's fast enough that it would take about 6,500 years. We need to get to something like 99.999% the speed of light to be able to make it to the closest star in a lifetime. It would take years, but seem like months to the person on board. So that's the thing about aliens coming here. Even if they could somehow detect us, and even if they could go very close to the speed of light, they would have to practically be on our doorstep to reach us. Each 42 said. Imagine you own an infinitely sized hotel which is currently fully booked as we have an infinite amount of guests in. A guest turns up and wants a room. We can't turn this guy away, right? We have an infinite amount of rooms. So we ask all our guests to move up into the room 1 up from theirs. So room 1 moves to 2, to 3 and etc. Well, look at that, we have room 1 free. That's infinity plus 1. Now an infinitely sized bus turns up and an infinite amount of guests now want rooms. Well, we wouldn't be much of an infinite hotel if we couldn't accommodate, so we say to all our guests, please move into the room double your own. So room 1 moves to 2, to 4, 3 to 6 and etc. Now if you double any whole Number, you always get an even number, which means we now have an infinite amount of odd rooms free. That's infinity plus infinity. We obviously now have more guests than before in a way we can track mathematically. Another easy way to think about it is that we can count 1, 2, 3, to infinity. We can also count like 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 2, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, to infinity, which will obviously take longer and have more numbers. Both are still infinite, yet one set of numbers is obviously going to be larger. Airplane with Wi-Fi said. There is also infinite infinity, where an infinite party bus without seats shows up and everyone needs a room. They all have infinitely long names that are a random combination of A and B. So you give everyone a room, or so you think. But if you take the first letter of the name of the first person, and swap it, so A becomes B, or B becomes A, repeat with the second letter of the second person, and so on for every person, and that is the name of a person without a room yet, and you can do this an infinite amount of times. Frothy Moisture said. It wasn't MAGA that attacked the Capitol on the 6th. It was Antifa, pretending to be MAGA. Ashley Babbitt was shot and killed on the 6th at the Capitol. Ashley Babbitt was MAGA. Ashley Babbitt was murdered, unarmed, and a martyr. Ashley Babbitt was not Antifa. Ashley Babbitt was MAGA. Ashley Babbitt was attacking the Capitol on the 6th and was killed by police, stopping her from getting into the building. But it was Antifa breaking in, not MAGA. Antifa, pretending to be MAGA. Except Ashley Babbitt, who was a MAGA hero, but also she was Antifa, but also. Writer for Hire here said. The common answer is before the Big Bang time didn't mean anything, so it's useless to plot the chronology before then, but even in the non-existence of time, reality still had to start somewhere, even if time started at the same time. There has to be a start to time even without a start of time. True, you can't say there was ever nothing in our trajectory, but time had to start somewhere and had to start from something. Existence is a mindfuck. Independent Oil 5951 said. Let's say I invent a silicon circuit that perfectly models a neuron. If I replaced each and every neuron in your brain with a silicon one at a time in such a way that you never lost consciousness, did I kill you? When? Is what is left of you thinking and feeling and experiencing the world, or are you a robot? If you're a robot, when did that happen? We know from medical record that people can still function with large portions of their brain missing, so clearly I didn't kill you with the first neuron. Not only that, but the other neurons were basically unaware some neurons went missing since they're still talking to perfect replicas. But if you're not a robot, then how are you still here when your brain is completely destroyed? Are you just the program your brain is running? No matter the hardware? Jedi are taking over said. Here is a social paradox for you. You use the left lane to pass cars and you were supposed to follow the flow of traffic. However, if you go beyond the speed limit, you're breaking traffic laws, which means by default, going the speed limit must be the flow of traffic. However, if you go the speed limit in the left lane, you are probably impeding traffic. So should you follow the law or social convention? I've argued this point and avid people adamant breaking the speed limit and going the flow of traffic is the right answer, but you're breaking the law, making it the wrong answer. Not Ablonobo said. It doesn't know the future. Sounds like what you're referring to is the fact that the brain sends out impulses to act a fraction of a second, not 30 seconds, before your conscious mind makes a decision to do the action. It's not a time paradox thing, but it is weird and interesting. The really weird thing is that it seems to be that what we experience as making a decision is actually just the conscious mind rationalizing why it's doing something the subconscious already decided to do. There are a lot of mechanisms in the brain that work like this. Everything you see and hear, your picture of the world, isn't experienced in real time. Your brain takes a split second to process all the information, then re-edits it retroactively to make you feel like you experienced it in real time. Bleeding Teal said. That's not a paradox because a vaccine and the disease it treats don't exist in a vacuum. A disease is evolving continuously. So the reason it matters if you take it is to prevent the disease from evolving into something the vaccine no longer is effective against. Additionally, not everyone is medically able to receive a vaccine against whatever hypothetical disease you're referencing. The point in everyone getting the vaccine is that those who are medically unable are protected, And to ensure the disease doesn't evolve past vaccine efficacy and the populace ends up back at day one starting over developing a vaccine. F. River said. Fermi paradox. If the universe is constantly expanding at the rate we believe it to be, then there would be infinite amounts of alien species, and the likelihood that we encounter such a species is incredibly high. On the flip side, if the universe is constantly expanding at the rate we believe it to be, the likelihood we encounter an alien species is so vast and expanse is incredibly small. PM Your Smiling Face said. The prophesy paradox. Someone predicts that in the future, you're going to be shot to death outside when it's dark out, so you only go out during daylight hours. In fact, to avoid the temptation to go out when it's dark, you go to bed as soon as it's dark, and you get up at first light. Because of this habit, you don't have a lot of friends because you're never available to go out with them. Also, you miss an evening news story about a full solar eclipse the next day, and being the loner you are, no one else tells you. So there you are, outside at midday when the eclipse occurs. It gets completely dark and someone shoots you dead. On the one hand, the prediction turned out to be true. On the other hand, had you not heard the prediction, you might have lived your life differently, so that you wouldn't have been outside during the eclipse. Maybe you would have partied all night and slept through the eclipse, for example. So did knowing your fate cause it to happen, or if you hadn't known it was going to happen, would you have been in the wrong place at the wrong time anyway? Or if you hadn't been aware of the prediction, would you have gone out at night and gotten shot on a different occasion? I know no one can predict the future in real life, but it is an occasional theme in both Greek mythology and some sci-fi shows. Totes not an NSA guy said. The one with infinite balls in the urn. You have infinite balls, numbered 1, 2, 3. First you put in balls 1-10, then take out ball 10. Next you put in balls 11-20 and take out ball 20, on and on to infinity. At the end of the procedure, there are still infinite balls in the urn. What if, instead of taking out ball 10 on step 1 and 20 on step 2, you take out ball 1 in step 1 and ball 2 on step 2? Every ball gets taken out during a step, so no balls are left at the end. Even though we did the exact same thing of adding 10 balls, then removing 1. Plutus brother said. It's not about who runs the government, but who enables it. Ordinary people proffer any government's power, because the politician's law means nothing unless someone enforces it. By and large, the soldiers, scientists, bankers, lawyers, farmers and factory workers are not criminals, but participants in a social construct. That social construct, the culture that is created and nurtured by the government, will however commit acts of violence to enforce compliance. Any one of those actors can and will be sent to the gulag regardless of their role or standing. Definitely a paradox when free actors support the organism that oppresses them. Antisocial sniper said. One that I think about from time to time is the one about the scientist who wakes up one morning to find a book containing schematics for a time machine at his front door. The science in the book is so advanced he barely even understands it, but he studies it for decades until he's finally able to build a working version. He then goes back to the day he found the book to meet the person who wrote it, but after waiting all night nobody shows up. Just before past him is supposed to wake up and come to the door, he realizes what he must do and leaves the book for himself to find before returning to the future. So who actually wrote the book and where did it come from? Sketch 99 said. The whole origins thing. There was the Big Bang, presumably, but what before it? A singularity? How did it get there? Where did it originate? What was the empty space around it? What was it before? If it was another universe, where did that universe begin? If we are in a simulation, who's running it and why, and where did they originate? Would they even know? There's the whole God and religion thing, but there's hundreds, thousands, of religions with hundreds or even thousands of gods. What makes your religion so different? What makes you so sure your God or gods are the goddess, that your truth that you choose to believe is the truth? Drives me crazy. Anikids 242 said. The paradox of the court. Over 2,000 years ago, in Greece, there was a lawyer named Protagoras. A young student, Euthyphus, requested to apprentice under him, but was unable to pay the fees. The student struck a deal saying, I will pay your fee the day I win my first case in the court. Teacher agreed. When the training was complete and a few years had elapsed without the student paying up, The teacher decided to sue the student in the court of law. The teacher thought to himself, if I win the case, as per the law, the student will have to pay me, as the case is about non-payment of dues. And if lose the case, the student will still have to pay me, because he would have won his first case. Either way I will get paid. The student's view was, if I win the case, I won't have to pay the teacher, as the case is about my non-payment of fees. And if I lose the case, I don't have to pay him since I wouldn't have won my first case yet. Either way I will not pay the teacher. This is known as Protagoras paradox. Whichever way you look, both have equally convincing arguments. One can go either way in supporting the teacher or the student and would not be wrong. Gremtrix said, Lorraine Baines from the Back to the Future movie should not resemble Maggie McFly from BTTF3. They are not related. Example. For Lorraine to resemble Maggie, they would have to be relatives. But, if Maggie is a distant relative of Lorraine Baines, and Seamus McFly is a distant relative of George McFly, then George and Lorraine would also be related. Seamus and Maggie are from the McFly side of Marty's family and not the Baines side of Marty's family. I do understand that it was probably just so Robert Zemeckis could have the Marty wakes up to his mom scene in all 3 movies. The scene still works even if it was another actress. She could have simply done the scene in the same style. We would understand that Seamus and Marty are related despite her being played by someone else. Having her resemble Lorraine just makes it confusing. It's not a huge deal. I never noticed it when I was younger. But over the last few years of many repeat viewings of the series, it still bugs me.